So, you were just born. Congratulations, you're in India around 500 BCE, or maybe it's 1200 CE, or 1947, or honestly, 2025. Because here's the thing about the caste system. It doesn't matter when you were born. What matters is who you were born to. Because before you even take your first breath, your entire life has already been decided. Your job, your status, who you can marry, who you can eat with, where you can live, even which well you're allowed to drink from. And if you don't like it, too bad. You can't opt out. You can't work harder and climb the ladder. You can't move to a different city and start fresh. Because this system isn't just social. It's religious. It's cosmic. It's divine law. And it's been running for over 3,000 years. Welcome to the caste system, the world's most enduring form of social control. Let's begin in 2025. People love to say you can be anything you want. Motivational quotes, self-help books, Instagram manifestation boards. In the caste system, you are what you're born. End of story. No dreams, no ambitions, no following your passion. Your destiny was decided before you existed. Here's how it worked. According to ancient Hindu texts, specifically the Rig Veda and later the Manusmriti, society was divided into 4 main categories, called Varnas, and these weren't just job descriptions. They were a hierarchy ordained by the gods. At the top, Brahmins, priests, scholars, the holy ones, they performed rituals, studied sacred texts, and advised kings. They were considered the mouth of Brahma, the creator god, pure, wise, untouchable in the good way. Just below them, Kshatriyas, warriors, rulers, the protectors, they fought wars, governed kingdoms, and maintained order. The arms of Brahma, respected, powerful, but still beneath the priests, next Vaishyas, merchants, farmers, traders. They produced goods, managed commerce, and kept the economy running. The thighs of Brahma, important, sure but not noble. And at the bottom of the 4, Varnas, Shudras, servants, laborers, the working class. They served the 3 upper castes. The feet of Brahma, necessary but lesser. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's for groups, rigid but manageable. Yeah, about that. Below the Shudras, literally outside the Varna system, were the dalits, also called untouchables. Outcasts, the broken people, in Sanskrit, a Varna without Varna. They weren't even part of society. They were considered so impure, so polluted, that their very shadow could contaminate someone. Their jobs, cleaning sewers, handling corpses, tanning leather, disposing of dead animals, anything involving death, filth, or bodily waste. Because according to the rules, purity was everything, and they were the opposite of pure. Now, here's the kicker. You didn't choose your caste. You were born into it, and you died in it. There was no social mobility, no meritocracy, no work hard and succeed. If you were born a Brahmin, you'd live in privilege. If you were born a dalit, you'd live in degradation. And it wasn't random. It was justified by karma. See, Hinduism teaches reincarnation. Your soul is reborn based on your actions in past lives. So if you were born a dalit, that meant you did something terrible in your last life. You deserved this suffering. It was cosmic justice. And if you accepted your place, did your duty, and didn't complain, maybe, you'd be reborn into a higher caste next time. But rebel, question the system. Congratulations, you're coming back as a worm. It was the perfect social control mechanism. Not only was inequality baked into the system, it was sacred. Questioning it wasn't just illegal or taboo, it was blasphemy. Let's put this in modern terms. Imagine being born and immediately being told, you will be a janitor forever, so will your children and their children. You can't be a doctor, even if you're smart. You can't be a CEO, even if you're driven. You can't even eat lunch with people from other professions. Why? Because God said so. And if you complain, you'll be reborn as a cockroach. That's the caste system. And it wasn't just theoretical, it was enforced, violently, if a Shudra dared to listen to Vedic chants. The sacred texts reserved for Brahmins, molten lead, was poured into their ears. If a dalit touched a Brahmin, even accidentally, they could be beaten, killed, their whole family punished. If you drank from the wrong well, poisoned, stoned, burned alive, this wasn't ancient folklore, this was law. Written in religious texts, enforced by local rulers, accepted by society, and it lasted for millennia. So yeah, your birth didn't just determine your job, it determined your worth as a human being, and there was no escape. Let's talk about the dalits. the untouchables. The people so impure that even their presence was considered contaminating. If you think that's an exaggeration, it's not. In many parts of India, dalits weren't allowed to enter temples, draw water from public wells, walk on the same streets as upper caste people, let their shadow fall on a Brahmin. Yes, their shadow. In some regions, dalits had to carry a broom to sweep away their footprints so upper caste people wouldn't step where they'd walked. In others, they had to wear bells around their necks, like cattle, so people could hear them coming and avoid them. They were required to live outside village boundaries, in separate settlements, often without access to clean water, schools, or medical care, because proximity to them was considered polluting. Let's be clear about what untouchable meant. It didn't just mean you couldn't touch them. It meant you couldn't eat with them, you couldn't share food or water with them, you couldn't sit near them, you couldn't let them into your home. You couldn't marry them, obviously. In some places, you couldn't even look at them. There are records from the 19th century of dalits being required to call out warnings as they walked, so upper caste people could avoid seeing them. Of dalit children being banned from schools because their presence would pollute upper caste children. Of dalit women being prohibited from covering their chests because modesty was considered an upper caste privilege. Let me repeat that. Dalit women were forced to go topless, not by choice, by law, because clothing was seen as a sign of dignity, and dignity wasn't for them. Now let's talk about their work. Dalits were forced into the most degrading, dangerous jobs, manual scavenging, literally cleaning human feces from dry toilets by hand, tanning leather, working with dead animals, which were considered impure, removing dead cattle and other carcasses. These jobs were necessary for society to function, but the people doing them treated like they were subhuman, and they weren't paid fairly. Often they weren't paid at all. They worked in exchange for leftover food, or scraps, or nothing. And if they refused, beaten, exiled, killed, there's a term in Hindu texts, chandala. It refers to the lowest of the low, people whose very existence was considered a sin. Chandalas were forbidden from participating in religious life. They couldn't perform rituals, couldn't be cremated in regular cremation grounds. Some texts even said that if a chandala touched a sacred fire, the fire itself became polluted. Think about that. They were considered so impure that even fire, one of the most purifying elements in Hinduism, could be tainted by them. This wasn't just discrimination. This was dehumanization, codified into religion. And it was taught to children from birth. Upper caste kids grew up learning that dalits were beneath them, that it was natural, divinely ordained, and dalit kids. They grew up learning that they deserved this, that they were paying for sins from a past life, that their suffering had meaning. It was psychological warfare, and it worked for thousands of years. Millions of people accepted their place at the bottom because they were told it was karma. But here's the thing, some didn't accept it, some resisted, and when they did, the system responded with extreme violence. There are countless stories of dalits being massacred for entering a temple, of entire dalit villages being burned because someone married outside their caste, of dalit leaders being assassinated for demanding equality. Even in the 20th century, even after independence, because the caste system wasn't just old, it was entrenched, and people with power don't give it up easily. Let's say you're in love. It's the 1600s, or the 1800s, or 2015. Doesn't matter. You've met someone. You're happy. You want to get married. There's just one problem. They're from a different caste. Maybe you're a Shudra and they're a Vishya. Maybe you're a Dalit and they're literally anyone else. Either way, congratulations. You've just signed your own death warrant. Because in the caste system, marriage wasn't about love. It was about purity. The system was obsessed with keeping bloodlines clean. Mixing castes was considered the ultimate pollution. It disrupted the cosmic order. It insulted the gods. It threatened the entire social structure. And so, it was forbidden. Not just discouraged, forbidden. If you tried to marry outside your caste, especially if you were a lower caste person marrying up, you could be disowned by your family, beaten publicly, paraded naked through the streets, murdered. Yes, murdered. This is called an honor killing, and it still happens today. Let's talk numbers. According to a 2016 study, India sees around 1,000 honor killings per year, most of them caste-related. A Dalit man marries an upper caste woman. Her family kills them both. A Brahmin woman elopes with a Shudra man. Her brothers hunt them down. And these aren't random acts of violence. They're planned. Families hold meetings. Village councils, also known as Kat panchayats, issue death sentences. and then they carry them out, sometimes in broad daylight. Let me give you a real example. 2016, Udamalpit, Tamil Nadu, a 22-year-old Dalit man named Shankar married a woman named Kausalya. She was from a dominant caste. Her family was furious. They tried to stop the marriage, threatened them, disowned her, but Shankar and Kausalya stayed together, so her family hired men to kill them. In March 2016, in broad daylight, on a busy street, Shankar was hacked to death with machetes. Kausalya was injured but survived. Her father was arrested. But here's the thing, he had support. People in his community defended him, said he was protecting family honor, that Shankar had polluted the family by marrying above his caste. That's the reality. Even in 2016, in a democratic, modern India, caste-based honor killings were still being justified. And it's not just murder, there's also social ostracism. If you marry outside your caste, your family might disown you, your community might shun you, you could lose your job, your home, your friends, you become invisible, and your children. They're considered outcasts too. There's even a term for children of intercaste marriages. Varnasankara, mixed blood, polluted, not fully part of any caste. The Manusmriti, the ancient Hindu law text, calls them a danger to society. It says that when castes mix, the entire social order collapses. Chaos reigns. And so, intercaste marriage wasn't just frowned upon. It was treated as civilizational collapse. Now compare this to modern dating. In 2025, people debate whether pineapple belongs on pizza. In caste-obsessed India, people debate whether you deserve to live based on who you married. And here's the kicker. Even when intercaste marriages were technically legal, even when the government said, "You can marry whoever you want," society said, "but we'll kill you if you do." And often, the police wouldn't even investigate, because the police were upper caste, the judges were upper caste, the politicians were upper caste. The whole system protected itself. So yeah, marrying for love. In the caste system, that's not romantic, that's revolutionary, and revolutions get crushed. So for thousands of years, the caste system existed. Brutal, rigid, but somewhat fluid in practice. Local variations, different rules in different regions. Some flexibility depending on occupation or wealth, and then the British showed up and decided to organize it. Because if there's one thing the British Empire loved, it was categorizing people and then exploiting them efficiently. When the British colonized India in the 18th and 19th centuries, they were confused by the caste system. It was too complicated, too regional, too inconsistent. So they did what colonizers do. They simplified it. They conducted censuses, massive surveys asking people their caste. They created rigid categories where before there had been nuance. They wrote it all down, made official lists. Suddenly, caste became bureaucratic. Before the British, you might change your caste by changing your occupation, or by migrating to a new region, or by accumulating wealth and influence. But after the British formalized it, your caste was on paper, permanent, official, inescapable. The British also used caste to divide and rule. They favored certain castes over others. Brahmins were recruited into administrative roles because they were educated. Certain warrior castes were recruited into the army, dalits and lower castes, ignored or further marginalized. The British didn't invent the caste system, but they ossified it. They turned a social structure into a legal one, and in doing so, they made it harder to escape. They also introduced new forms of exploitation. Take the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871. The British declared entire communities, mostly lower caste and Dalit groups, as habitual criminals. Not because they committed crimes, but because of their caste. If you were born into one of these groups, you were required to register with the police. You needed permission to travel. You could be arrested without evidence. Your children were taken away and put in reformatory settlements. Entire communities were criminalized by birth. The act wasn't repealed until 1952, 5 years after independence. The British also disrupted traditional economies. Many Dalit communities had specialized skills, leatherwork, metalwork, etc. But British industrial goods flooded the market. Local artisans couldn't compete, so Dalits lost even the meager economic independence they had. They became even more dependent on upper caste landowners, more exploited, more trapped. And when Indians started fighting for independence, guess who was left out of the conversation? Dalits. The Indian National Congress, led mostly by upper caste leaders, focused on getting rid of the British, but not on getting rid of caste. In fact, many independence leaders were uncomfortable talking about caste. Gandhi himself called Dalits Harijans, children of God. Sounds nice, right? Except it was patronizing. It didn't challenge the system, it just rebranded it. Gandhi opposed separate electorates for Dalits. He believed in caste harmony, the idea that everyone should stay in their caste but be treated with dignity. Which is a bit like saying, yes, you'll always be a slave, but we'll be nice about it. There was one man who saw through this, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, born into a Dalit family. Brilliant, educated. He fought for Dalit rights his entire life, and he argued that caste couldn't be reformed, it had to be destroyed. He said, caste is not just a division of labor, it is a division of laborers, meaning it's not about jobs, it's about dehumanization, and you can't reform dehumanization, you can only end it. But Ambedkar was a minority voice. Most independence leaders wanted to preserve Hindu unity. Challenging caste threatened that unity, so they ignored it. And when India finally won independence in 1947, guess what? Didn't change. August 15, 1947, India is free. The British are gone. Nehru gives a stirring speech about destiny and freedom. Fireworks, celebrations, a new beginning, and for Dalits, nothing changed. Sure, the Indian Constitution, drafted largely by Dr. Ambedkar, technically outlawed untouchability. Article 17 says, untouchability is abolished, and its practice in any form is forbidden. Beautiful words. But words don't change centuries of conditioning. On paper, Dalits were equal. In reality, they were still banned from temples, still denied access to wells, still forced into degrading labor, still beaten or killed for stepping out of line. The Indian government did introduce reservations, a form of affirmative action. A percentage of government jobs and university seats were reserved for scheduled castes, Dalits, and scheduled tribes. This was Ambedkar's doing, a way to give marginalized communities a chance. But guess what happened? Upper caste Indians were furious.